The shuttle landed softly on the golden platform of the Volanthi Imperial Palace. Daniel Carter stood up from his seat and looked through the small window. The palace was massive. Towers of white stone rose into a purple sky, and ships moved slowly between them like metal birds. It was beautiful, but Daniel felt no excitement. He was here to do a job, nothing more. Ambassador Linda Hayes walked beside him as they stepped off the shuttle. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and gray hair. She had chosen Daniel for this mission herself. "Remember," she said quietly, "this is about diplomacy." The Empress agreed to have a human guard as a sign of goodwill. "But she doesn't actually want you here." Daniel nodded. He understood. He was a symbol, not a soldier. At least, that was what they expected him to be. The palace guards met them at the entrance. They were Volanthi-tall beings with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and golden, and they looked at Daniel the way someone might look at an insect. One of them, wearing armor covered in silver markings, stepped forward. "I am Commander Zyrith," he said. His voice was deep and cold. "I lead the Royal Guard. You will follow my orders without question. Do you understand, human?" "Yes, Commander," Daniel said. Zyrith's eyes narrowed. "Good. Stay silent. Stay out of the way. That is all we require of you." They walked through long hallways filled with light. Volanthi servants and officials moved past them, and every single one stared at Daniel. Some whispered to each other. Others laughed softly. Daniel kept his face calm. He had been stared at before. He had been laughed at before. It meant nothing to him. They entered a grand hall where hundreds of aliens had gathered. At the far end, sitting on a throne made of crystal, was Empress Volussornai. She was stunning in a terrible way. Her skin was darker blue than the others. Her 4 arms covered in golden rings, and her eyes burned like twin suns. Power radiated from her like heat from a fire. Ambassador Hayes bowed deeply. Daniel did the same. The Empress looked at them for a long moment. Then she smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "So this is the human guard," she said. Her voice echoed through the hall. "I must admit, I expected something more impressive." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Tell me, human," the Empress continued, "what makes your people think you are worthy of standing in my palace? Your species has only traveled among the stars for 200 years. You have no great empires, no ancient histories. You come from a world so dangerous that most species cannot survive there for a single day. Yet you yourselves are soft and fragile." Daniel said nothing. "Perhaps," the Empress said. Leaning forward, "your leaders sent you here as a joke. A small, weak creature to amuse us." More laughter filled the hall. Ambassador Hayes stepped forward. "Your Majesty, Corporal Carter is a decorated soldier. He served with honor and—" "I did not ask for his history," the Empress interrupted. "I can see what he is. A primitive from a death world who somehow survived his own stupidity." She waved one of her hands. "Take him away. Give him something simple to do. Perhaps he can guard the storage rooms." Commander Zyrith grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward a side door. Daniel did not resist. He walked in silence through more hallways until they reached a dark corridor far from the main halls. "This is your post," Zyrith said. "You will stand here and watch the door. Do not speak to anyone. Do not move unless I tell you. Understood?" "Yes, Commander." Zyrith left without another word. Daniel stood alone in the darkness. The corridor was empty and silent. Hours passed. No one came. He was exactly where they wanted him, forgotten and invisible. Late that night, Ambassador Hayes found him. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said. "I thought this would be different. I thought showing them a real human soldier would change their minds about us." "It's fine," Daniel said. "I didn't come here expecting respect. And why did you come? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Because someone had to. And I've never been afraid of being alone. Linda looked at him with sad eyes. You deserve better than this. Maybe, Daniel said. But deserving something and getting it are two different things. She left, and Daniel returned to his silence. The next few days were the same. He stood guard at storage rooms, servant corridors, and empty hallways. The other guards ignored him or mocked him when they passed. He heard their jokes about humans, how weak they were, how primitive, how foolish. Daniel never responded. He just watched and listened. On the fourth night, something changed. Daniel was standing near a communication room when he heard voices inside. He recognized one of them, a palace official named Torvin, who worked closely with the Empress. The other voice was strange, distorted, like it was being filtered through a machine. The time is coming, the distorted voice said. The Empress has betrayed our cause by making peace with the humans. She must be removed. I understand, Torvin replied. The Void Covenant will have its justice. Daniel's heart beat faster, but he kept perfectly still. He listened until the conversation ended, then memorized every detail. The next morning, he reported what he heard to Commander Zyrith. Zyrith stared at him with disgust. You expect me to believe that one of our most trusted officials is a traitor? Based on the word of a human? I know what I heard, Commander. You heard nothing, Zyrith growled. You are seeing threats that do not exist because you want to feel important. Go back to your post and do not waste my time again. Daniel left without arguing. But he knew the truth. Something dark was growing inside the palace, and no one wanted to believe him. That night, he stood alone in his corridor and thought about what to do. He could stay silent and follow orders. He could wait for someone else to discover the danger. Or he could act on his own and risk everything. Daniel closed his eyes and remembered the war. He remembered the friends he had lost, the battles he had survived, and the promise he had made to himself that he would never stand by and let innocent people die if he could stop it. He opened his eyes. He would find the truth himself. And when the time came, he would be ready. 3 days after Daniel reported what he heard, a message arrived on his personal device. It came from a secure channel used only by Earth's intelligence services. The sender was Kira Lawson, an officer stationed at the human embassy. Meet me at the Eastern Garden. Midnight. Come alone. Daniel waited until the palace was quiet, then made his way through the shadows. The Eastern Garden was a beautiful place filled with strange flowers that glowed in the darkness. Kira was already there, sitting on a stone bench. She was young, maybe 30, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're the one who reported the communication, she said. It was not a question. How do you know about that? I know a lot of things, Kira replied. That's my job. And right now, my job is telling me that you stepped into something very dangerous. She handed him a small data tablet. On the screen was information about a group called the Void Covenant, a terrorist organization that had been growing in power for years. They believed the Volanthi Imperium had grown weak by making peace with other species. They wanted to return to the old ways, when the Volanthi conquered and destroyed anyone who stood against them. The Empress signed 3 peace treaties in the last decade, Kira explained. The biggest one was with Earth. The Void Covenant sees that as the ultimate betrayal. They hate humans more than anyone. And they're planning to kill her, Daniel said. Yes, we've intercepted fragments of their communications. Something big is coming, but we don't know when or how. The Volanthi security forces won't listen to us. They think we're paranoid. Or, worse, they think we're trying to manipulate them. Daniel looked at the data tablet. Names, locations, connections, everything pointed to a plot that went deep into the palace itself. Torvin is one of them, he said. We think so, but we can't prove it. And without proof, no one will act. Daniel handed the tablet back. What do you want me to do? Keep watching. Keep listening. You're invisible to them, Daniel. They don't see you as a threat. Use that. He nodded slowly. And if I find something, then we'll figure out how to stop them. Together. Kira disappeared into the night, and Daniel returned to his post. But now his mind was working differently. Every conversation he overheard, every face he saw, every shadow that moved, he analyzed it all. Over the next week, he noticed patterns. Certain guards met in secret when they thought no one was watching. Messages were passed between officials who should have had no connection. And Torvin, the official Daniel had heard that first night, was always at the center of it. Daniel kept records of everything. Times, places, names. He built a picture of the conspiracy piece by piece. Finally, he had enough. He went to Commander Zyrith again. I have evidence, Daniel said. Torvin is working with the Void Covenant. So are 3 members of your Royal Guard. They're planning an attack during the anniversary celebration. Zyrith took the data tablet and looked at it. For a moment, Daniel thought he might actually listen. Then Zyrith threw the tablet against the wall. Do you think I'm a fool? He shouted. You come to me with accusations against our most loyal people, and you expect me to believe the word of a human? You are trying to create chaos. You are trying to make us look weak. Commander, I'm trying to save the Empress. Silence. Zyrith stepped closer, his golden eyes burning with anger. If you speak of this again, I will have you removed from the palace. I will tell your ambassador that you are mentally unstable. I will destroy whatever small career you have left. Do you understand me? Daniel met his gaze without flinching. I understand that you're making a mistake. For a moment, Zyrith looked like he might strike him. Then he turned away. Get out of my sight. Daniel left, but he did not give up. He requested an audience with the Empress herself. To his surprise, she agreed to see him, probably because she wanted to mock him again. He was brought to her private chamber, a room filled with beautiful art and soft light. She sat on a smaller throne, looking down at him with cold amusement. The human guard wants to speak with me, she said. This should be entertaining. Tell me, little creature, what is so important that you dare to waste my time? Daniel told her everything. The communications he overheard. The evidence he gathered. The threat against her life. When he finished, the Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed. You expect me to believe that my own people want to kill me? That a human, a primitive from a death world, discovered a plot that my entire intelligence network missed? I expect you to consider the possibility, Your Majesty. Her laughter stopped. Her eyes turned cold. You forget your place, she said softly. You are nothing here. You are a symbol, a decoration, a thing we tolerate because your ambassador begged us to show mercy. You do not speak to me as an equal. You do not give me warnings as if I were some child who needs protection. She stood and walked toward him until she was close enough to touch. If you speak of this again to anyone, I will have you executed. Not arrested, not deported, executed. Your body will be sent back to Earth in pieces as a message to your people about what happens when humans overstep their bounds. Daniel looked into her burning eyes. I hope you're right, Your Majesty. I hope I'm wrong about everything. But if I'm not, please remember that I tried to warn you. He bowed and left. That night, Daniel sat alone in his quarters and thought about his choices. He could stop now. He could follow orders, keep his head down, and let whatever happened happen. It would not be his fault. He had tried, but that was not who he was. He thought about his training, about the years he had spent learning how to fight, how to survive, how to protect others. He thought about the friends he had buried and the promises he had made. He could not let innocent people die. Not if he could stop it. He pulled up the data he had collected and studied it again. The anniversary celebration was in 3 days. Hundreds of guests would attend. The Empress would be surrounded by guards, but 3 of those guards were traitors. Daniel began to plan. He mapped the palace, memorized every entrance and exit, and calculated how long it would take him to reach the throne room from his post. If no one else would act, he would act alone. And when the attack came, he would be ready. The night of the anniversary celebration arrived. The palace was filled with lights and music. Thousands of guests from across the galaxy gathered in the Grand Hall to honor the Volanthe Imperium. Nobles wore their finest clothes. Officials smiled and made empty promises to each other. And at the center of it all, Empress Valeth sat on her crystal throne, looking like a goddess among mortals. Daniel was stationed far from the celebration. Commander Zyreth had assigned him to guard a maintenance corridor on the other side of the palace. It was another insult, another reminder that he was worthless in their eyes. But Daniel had expected this. He had planned for it. He stood at his post and waited. His heart beat steadily. His breathing was calm. Every muscle in his body was ready. At exactly midnight, the lights went out. Screams filled the palace as darkness swallowed everything. Then came the explosions, 3 of them, one after another, shaking the walls and floor. Emergency alarms began to wail, their red lights flashing in the blackness. Daniel moved. He ran through the corridor toward the Grand Hall. Around him, guards rushed in different directions, shouting orders that no one followed. Chaos had taken hold of the palace. The first attacker appeared from a side. Passager, Volanthe, wearing black armor with the symbol of the Void Covenant on his chest. He was big, at least 8 feet tall, with 4 arms carrying weapons. The attacker saw Daniel and laughed. "A human? Here?" He raised his weapon. "This will be easy." Daniel did not slow down. He closed the distance in 3 steps, ducked under the weapon, and drove his fist into the attacker's throat. The Volanthe choked and stumbled. Daniel grabbed his arm, twisted it until the bone broke, and threw him to the ground. Before the attacker could recover, Daniel took his weapon and moved on. More attackers came. They were everywhere, pouring through doors, climbing through windows, fighting the confused guards. Daniel cut through them like a knife through water. He did not think. He did not hesitate. He simply acted. A group of 5 Void Covenant soldiers blocked the hallway. They saw Daniel coming and spread out to surround him. "Kill the human!" One of them shouted. Daniel grabbed a fallen piece of metal from the floor and threw it at the nearest soldier. It hit him in the face, and he fell. Daniel rushed the second soldier, using his smaller size to get under his guard. 2 quick strikes to the knees brought him down. The third soldier swung a blade at Daniel's head. He ducked, grabbed the soldier's arm, and used his own momentum to flip him into the 4th soldier. Both crashed to the ground. The 5th soldier ran. Daniel kept moving. He reached the main corridor leading to the Grand Hall and found bodies everywhere. Guards and guests lay on the floor, dead or injured. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. Through the haze, Daniel could see the doors to the throne room. They were open. Inside, the situation was worse. The celebration had become a massacre. Void Covenant soldiers held the remaining guests at weapon point. Bodies of royal guards littered the floor. And near the throne, Commander Zyreth lay on his back, bleeding from a wound in his chest. He was still alive, but barely. At the center of the room stood 3 figures in black armor. The traitors, the 3 royal guards who had betrayed their oath. They were walking toward the Empress, who sat frozen on her throne. Her golden eyes were wide with something Daniel had never seen in them before. Fear. The lead traitor raised his blade. It glowed with blue energy, humming softly in the silence. "The Void Covenant sends its regards, Your Majesty," he said. "Your time is over. The old ways will return." Daniel did not announce himself. He did not shout a warning. He simply attacked. He crossed the throne room in seconds, faster than any Volanthi could move. The first traitor turned just in time to see Daniel's fist connect with his face. Bones cracked. The traitor flew backward and crashed into a pillar. The second traitor swung his weapon at Daniel's chest. Daniel sidestepped, grabbed the traitor's arm, and broke it at the elbow. The traitor screamed. Daniel silenced him with a strike to the temple. The lead traitor, the one with the glowing blade, stared at Daniel with disbelief. "What are you?" he whispered. "Human," Daniel replied. The traitor attacked with fury, swinging his blade in wide arcs. He was bigger than Daniel, stronger, faster in some ways. But Daniel had fought bigger enemies before. He had trained for this his entire life. He dodged the first strike. The second grazed his shoulder, burning through his uniform and skin. Pain exploded through his arm, but Daniel pushed it away. Pain was just information. It could be ignored. He moved inside the traitor's guard and delivered 3 rapid strikes: stomach, chest, throat. The traitor staggered. Daniel grabbed his weapon hand, twisted, and drove the glowing blade into its owner's chest. The traitor's eyes went wide. Then he fell. Silence filled the throne room. Daniel stood among the bodies, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm from the burn wound. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline flooding his system. The Empress stared at him. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The surviving guests stared at him too. So did the remaining guards who had just arrived. Everyone looked at the small human standing in the middle of the carnage, surrounded by enemies twice his size. Daniel met the Empress's eyes. "Your Majesty," he said calmly, "are you injured?" She shook her head slowly. She was still trying to understand what she had just witnessed. Outside, the sounds of fighting continued. The attack was not over yet. But the Empress was safe, and that was all that mattered. Daniel picked up a weapon from the floor and turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" the Empress asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "There are more of them," Daniel said. "I need to help." He walked out of the throne room without looking back. The night was far from over. But for the first time since he arrived at the palace, Daniel felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The battle lasted 3 more hours. Daniel fought through corridor after corridor, room after room, until the last Void Covenant soldier was dead or captured. By the time his sun rose over the palace, his body was covered in wounds, burns, and bruises. He had not slept in over 30 hours. He had not eaten in 12. But he was still standing. The palace guards found him sitting against a wall near the eastern gate. His eyes were closed, and for a moment, they thought he was dead. Then he opened his eyes and looked up at them. "Is the Empress safe?" he asked. "Yes," one of the guards replied. "Because of you." They carried him to the medical wing. Volanthi doctors surrounded him, scanning his body with devices that beeped and flashed. What they found made them stop and stare at each other in confusion. "This is impossible," one doctor said. "What is it?" asked another. "His adrenaline levels. They're higher than anything I've ever seen. Any Volanthi with these numbers would be dead. His heart should have exploded hours ago." They continued their scans. His muscles were torn in dozens of places. His bones had microfractures from the impacts. The burn on his shoulder had reached the muscle tissue. By every medical standard they knew, Daniel Carter should not have been able to move, let alone fight. But he had fought. And he had won. The Empress arrived at the medical wing an hour later. She walked slowly, her face pale and her eyes haunted. The confidence she had always carried was gone, replaced by something Daniel had never expected to. Uncertainty. She stopped beside his bed and looked down at him. "The doctors tell me you should be dead," she said. quietly. "I've been told that before," Daniel replied. "How? How did you do what you did?" "You killed 12 Void Covenant soldiers by yourself. Warriors trained since birth, physically superior to your species in every way. You should not have been able to defeat even one of them." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Do you know what Earth is like, Your Majesty?" She shook her head. "It's a death world. You said that yourself. The gravity is heavy. The weather is violent. The animals evolved to kill each other in 1,000 different ways. And humans, we survived all of it. Not because we're strong. Not because we're fast. But because we refuse to give up." He looked at her with tired eyes. "When a human is afraid, something happens inside us. Our bodies release chemicals that make us stronger, faster, more resistant to pain. Our ancestors needed this to survive, to fight predators, to protect their families, to keep going when everything said they should stop." The Empress listened without interrupting. "The Volanthi are physically superior to us. That's true. But your bodies never needed to develop the same survival response. When you face danger, you fight with skill and strength. When we face danger, we become something else entirely." "What do you become?" Daniel's voice dropped. "Monsters. The kind of monsters that can kill 12 warriors twice their size and keep fighting until there's enough to fight." The Empress sat down slowly on a chair beside his bed. She looked at him differently, now not with contempt, but with something close to respect. "Tell me about the war," she said. "The one your ambassador mentioned. The First Contact War." Daniel closed his eyes. The memories came flooding back, memories he had tried to bury for years. 15 years ago, Earth made contact with an alien species called the Kreth. They came to conquer us. They thought it would be easy. A primitive world with primitive technology. They were wrong. He remembered the burning cities, the ships in the sky, the screams of civilians running through the streets. The war lasted 4 years. We lost millions of people. Entire cities were destroyed. But we kept fighting. We fought with everything we had, weapons, vehicles, our bare hands when nothing else was left. He remembered his squad, his friends, the ones who never came home. I was 22 when the war started. By the time it ended, I had killed more enemies than I could count. I watched my friends die. I held them as they took their last breaths. And every time I wanted to stop, every time I wanted to give up, I remembered why I was fighting. Why? The Empress asked softly. Because there were people behind me who couldn't fight for themselves. Children, families, people who depended on us to protect them. I couldn't let them down. I couldn't let the dead down. He opened his eyes and looked at her. That's what you saw tonight, Your Majesty. You saw a human protecting someone. It doesn't matter that you mocked me. It doesn't matter that you threatened to execute me. When the attack came, I had a choice, let you die or save you. And for a human, that's not really a choice at all. The Empress was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, humbler. I have ruled this empire for 200 years. I have seen wars, betrayals, and disasters beyond counting. But I have never seen anything like what you did tonight. She stood and looked down at him. I was wrong about humans. I was wrong about you. And I am not too proud to admit it. Daniel nodded slowly. Thank you, Your Majesty. Rest now, she said. When you recover, we will talk again. There is much I want to learn about your people. She left, and Daniel lay alone in the quiet room. Outside, he could hear voices guards talking about what had happened. Doctors discussing his impossible biology. Officials trying to understand how a single human had saved the Empress. But Daniel did not care about any of that. He closed his eyes and thought about his friends, the ones who had died in the war, the ones who would never know what he had become. He had survived again. He had protected someone again. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Sleep finally took him, and for the first time in years, he did not dream of fire and death. He dreamed of a quiet place where the fighting was over and he could finally rest. But he knew, deep down, that the fighting was never truly over. It was simply waiting for the next time it was needed. And when that time came, he would be ready again. 2 weeks passed after the attack. The palace slowly returned to normal, though nothing would ever be quite the same. Workers repaired the damaged walls. Servants cleaned the blood from the floors. And throughout the Volanthi Imperium, people talked about what had happened, how a human guard had single-handedly saved the Empress from assassination. The investigation revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Torvin, the official Daniel had overheard on his 4th night, was arrested along with 17 other traitors. They had been planning the attack for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If Daniel had not intervened, the Empress would be dead, and the Void Covenant would be preparing for war against Earth. Commander Zyrith survived his wounds. He spent 8 days in the medical wing, hovering between life and death, before finally opening his eyes. The first thing he asked about was Daniel. "Where is the human?" he demanded. "Recovering," the doctors told him. "He saved your life, Commander. He saved all our lives." Zyrith was silent for a long time after that. On the 15th day, Daniel was summoned to the throne room. He walked through the same halls he had fought in, past the same doors where he had killed enemy after enemy. The palace felt different now. Guards nodded to him as he passed. Servants stepped aside with respect instead of contempt. Even the nobles looked at him with something other than mockery in their eyes. The throne room was filled with people. Ambassadors from a dozen worlds stood in rows along the walls. Officials and nobles crowded behind them. And at the center, on her crystal throne, sat Empress Valeth. She looked stronger than she had on the night of the attack. Her eyes were clear, her posture was straight. And when she saw Daniel enter, she actually smiled. "Come forward, Daniel Carter of Earth," she said. He walked through the crowd until he stood before the throne. Ambassador Linda Hayes was there too, standing off to the side with tears in her eyes. "Kneel," the Empress commanded. Daniel knelt. The Empress rose from her throne and walked down the steps until she stood directly in front of him. In her upper hands, she held a medallion made of golden metal, inscribed with symbols in the ancient Volanthi language. "For 5,000 years," she said, her voice carrying through the hall, "this honor has been given to the greatest heroes of our empire. Warriors who defended our people, leaders who shaped our history, champions who proved themselves worthy beyond all doubt." She placed the medallion around Daniel's neck. "Today, for the first time, this honor is given to a human. Daniel Carter, you are now a guardian of the Volanthi Imperium. Your name will be recorded in our histories. Your deeds will be remembered for generations." The crowd erupted in applause. Daniel looked up at the Empress and saw something in her eyes that surprised him. Gratitude. Real, genuine gratitude. "Rise, Guardian," she said. He stood, and she spoke again, this time more quietly so only he could hear. "I meant what I said in the medical wing. I was wrong about your people. I judge you by appearance and technology, not by the spirit that lives within you. That was my mistake, and I will not make it again." Daniel nodded. "Thank you, Your Majesty. But I didn't do this for honor or recognition. I did it because it was right." "I know," she said. "That is what makes it even more remarkable." The ceremony continued with speeches and celebrations, but Daniel barely heard any of it. His mind was elsewhere, thinking about the friends he had lost, the battles he had survived, and the strange path that brought him to this moment. Later that evening, Commander Zyrith found him in the Eastern Garden. The commander walked slowly, still recovering from his wounds, but his eyes were clear and focused. "I owe you an apology," Zyrith said. Daniel turned to look at him. "Commander, you tried to warn me. Twice. Both times I dismissed you. I called you a liar. I threatened you." Zyrith's voice was heavy with shame. "If I had listened, many of my guards would still be alive. The attack might have been stopped before it began." "You couldn't have known," Daniel said. "No, but I should have been willing to listen. Instead, I let my prejudice blind me." Zyrith stood straight and looked Daniel in the eyes. "I am sorry, Daniel Carter. Truly sorry." Daniel extended his hand, a human gesture of peace. Zyrith hesitated, then took it with one of his 4 hands. "Apology accepted," Daniel said. "Now let's make sure it never happens again." Zyrith nodded slowly. "The Empress has asked me to restructure the Royal Guard. She wants humans involved in our training. She wants us to learn what makes your species so effective." "I'd be happy to help," Daniel said. "Good, because I have much to learn." "We all do." They stood together in the garden as the stars began to appear in the purple sky. 2 warriors from different worlds, united by battle and respect. The next morning, Ambassador Linda Hayes met Daniel at the shuttle platform. She was returning to Earth to report on everything that had happened. "You know," she said, "when I chose you for this mission, I hoped you might change a few minds. I never imagined you'd change an entire empire." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't change anything. I just showed them what we've always been. And what's that?" He looked up at the unfamiliar stars above him. Survivors, protectors, people who refuse to give up, no matter the odds. Linda smiled and embraced him. "Take care of yourself, Daniel. And remember, you're not alone anymore. You never were." She boarded the shuttle and flew away. Daniel watched until she disappeared among the stars. That evening, the Empress addressed the entire Imperium through a broadcast that reached every planet under her rule. She spoke about the attack, the conspiracy, and the human who had saved her life. But more than that, she spoke about change. "For too long, we have looked down upon the younger species of the galaxy," she said. "We have called them primitive, weak, unworthy of our respect. I was the worst offender of all. But I have learned that true strength is not measured by size or age or technology. It is measured by heart, by courage, by the willingness to fight for what is right, even when all hope seems lost." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "Humans have this strength in abundance. And from this day forward, they will be honored as our equals, our partners, and our friends." Daniel watched the broadcast from his new quarters in the palace. He had been given rooms fit for a noble, with windows that overlooked the glowing towers of the city. It was more space than he had ever needed or wanted. But as he listened to the Empress's words, he realized something important. He had come to this place as an outsider, unwanted and alone. He had been mocked, threatened, and dismissed. But through it all, he had never stopped being himself. And in the end, that had been enough. He looked out at the stars and thought about the future. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, more enemies to face. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something he had almost forgotten was possible. Hope that he was not just a survivor anymore. He was not just a soldier. He was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of what humans could be when they were given a chance to prove themselves. And that, he thought, was worth fighting for.